Now, living well with LDS Hospital.
Well, September is wrapping up, and that means so is Suicide Prevention Month. But the conversation about suicide still needs to continue. So we are here with Adam Hornung, Director of LDS Hospital's Behavioral Health Services. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is a hard topic. This is a hard subject, but I think it's good to point out that Utah is one of the highest in the country for suicide. And I'm reading the statistics, 319 adults and over 20 teens die from suicide each year in Utah.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, and we definitely need to find ways to pull together and do a bit better that way, because we seem to struggle with that significantly here. So
what do you think leads to suicide?
Well, the number one thing that leads to suicide is untreated depression. So we know the national statistics with depression, 1 in 10 people is going to have a depressive episode this year in the country. The lifetime epidemiology with depression is about 1 in 3 or 1 in 4. So we know it's out there, and it's more common than we want to talk about, and that's definitely the number one cause that leads to suicide, is not being treated.
Well, you talk about how 1 in 10 people will have a depressive episode, but how many of those people do you think are recognizing that that's what it is?
Probably not many. I think it's not a common thing for someone to wake up and decide that I'm depressed. You know, it's important that we look at what depression is,
well,
and how it works.
Right. So what are some warning signs that we can be paying attention to?
You bet. So depression, you lose interest in things that you typically have had interest in the past. You know, it's not this sense of, oh, I'm sad. It's a pervasive, tough to get motivated to do much of anything.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely, you know, when it comes to suicide, you lose that zeal for life, that desire to live even. You may have thoughts or conversations or ideas about, you know, how that would happen if that's what somebody would choose to do: anger, isolation, making choices you wouldn't otherwise make.
If it's something that you feel like you might be battling, what do you suggest people do?
So there's a lot of options for people who are battling depression. You can make an appointment with a counselor. You can get a hold of your primary care physician. There's a suicide hotline nationally that people can call. Reach out to a friend. You know, have a conversation. I think with that, we need to make sure as friends that we're ready and willing to have that conversation and make it easier for folks to bring up if they're struggling.
I feel like one of the hardest things with depression is to recognize that it's not just a mood, it's not just a feeling, it's actually a mental disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a medical condition. So if you think about getting diagnosed with diabetes or hypertension or anything like that, depression is no different. It's a medical problem. And so that there's some stigma with that, but I think it's important to recognize that it's a medical problem, and it's no different than, you know, being diagnosed with something else. There's help available.
Well, I hate hearing, I mean, obviously it's terrible to hear adults, but to hear more teens having, you know, committing suicide here in Utah. I mean, what can we do as a community to really help prevent these tragic deaths?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we need to be educated as to how does this stuff come up, what are warning signs, and it's really easy to hop on the internet and read up on, you know, what are risk factors, what are things we can watch out for, and if we see any of those things, to have the courage to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And to have it more than once if you need to. You know, I don't think very often if you ask, somebody's gonna be willing to talk to you right away. They may, but it's probably gonna take you asking a couple times and being aware of what you're seeing.
How can people reach out to the behavioral health services at LDS Hospital if they feel like they or someone they know are struggling with depression?
So again, I think you can reach out to your primary care provider. You can talk to a counselor that you're seeing. You can call the general number of the hospital and ask for behavioral health services, and they'll get you connected with where you need to come.
Great, and you can also go to our website. We will have a link to LDShospital.org. There's the website right there on the screen for you guys. Thank you for taking the time out of
thanks for
talking
having
about
me.
something hard. It's the wrap up of a hard month, but